Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The National Rifle Association has finally picked the right battle with the right enemy. That enemy, of course, is the National Rifle Association. At the center of that war within the NRA stands the NRA's chief executive, Wayne LaPierre. Now, I have to admit to being wrong about Wayne LaPierre because I've always said that he devoted his professional life to making sure that America's mass murderers are the very best equipped mass murderers in the world, but it turns out he's also devoted his professional life to wildly and probably very illegally abusing the finances of the National Rifle Association, which is to say abusing the $35 a year that NRA members send to Wayne LaPierre for their memberships. When the Wall Street Journal first reported on the stunning level of Wayne LaPierre's personal use of NRA money, the NRA's new president, Carolyn Meadows, released a statement saying the entire board is fully aware of these issues. We have full confidence in Wayne LaPierre. That didn't sound quite right at the time, and now we know just how untrue it is because one of the board members released a statement today calling Carolyn Meadows' statement, quote, outright lies. Alan West served one term as a Republican member of the House of Representatives and is now in his second term as an NRA board member. And today he issued a written statement saying, I have never been told, advised, informed, or consulted about any of these details mentioned in the Wall Street Journal, and who knows how much more despicable spending of members' money. Alan West added, these statements have maliciously, recklessly, and purposefully put me and uninformed board members in legal jeopardy. Alan West is trying to make it very clear that he has no part in the financial fraud that is now being exposed at the NRA. Alan West revealed today that he supported former NRA President Oliver North's effort to get Wayne LaPierre to resign before all of this scandal became public. But Wayne LaPierre won that power struggle inside the NRA and forced Oliver North to resign. Alan West says there is a cabal of cronyism operating within the NRA, and that exists within the board of directors. This is becoming public because the NRA decided to sue the advertising agency that it had used for many years, claiming that the advertising agency's billing was inaccurate and unjustifiable. And so, as part of responding to that lawsuit, the advertising agency sent this letter to Wayne LaPierre in an attempt to clarify some of the underlying costs in the bills that the agency had sent to the NRA. The letter says, we need to address your wardrobe. You required us to provide, specifically purchases at the Xenia store in Beverly Hills. And right there in the middle of the letter is the breathtaking total that Wayne LaPierre spent on clothing, which he billed to the NRA's advertising agency, which then rebilled that to the NRA so that Wayne LaPierre's clothes were actually paid for with NRA dues. $274,695.03. all from just one store in Beverly Hills. Twice, Wayne LaPierre spent $39,000 in a single day at the Xenia store. The last time Wayne LaPierre spent $39,000 in a day at the Xenia store was September 22nd, 2015. And that should have been enough clothes for the rest of his life. But a year later, he spent $4,185 at that same store. And then 5 months after that, he spent another $21,080 at the Xenia store in Beverly Hills. All of it NRA dues money. The advertising agency that paid for the purchases at the store no doubt deducted the $274,000 as a legitimate business expense, which it is not. And so the advertising agency is now in real trouble with the IRS. Wayne LaPierre is now in probably bigger trouble with the IRS because according to tax law, the hundreds of thousands of dollars in clothing that Wayne LaPierre grabbed out of that store in Beverly Hills is considered regular income to Wayne LaPierre, $274,000 of regular income. And surely Wayne LaPierre was very unlikely to declare that as income on his tax returns. So Wayne LaPierre is probably in very, very deep tax trouble now. Then comes the law firm that has represented the NRA for years. Today in the Daily Beast, Betsy Woodruff reports that the NRA has been paying an outside law firm $100,000 a day. None of the legal experts who have studied the billing can understand it. $100,000 a day, that's just off the charts, said Deborah Rode, a legal ethics expert from Stanford Law School. The law firm sells itself as a multitasking law firm and includes in its list of skills crisis management. And now the NRA's law firm's outrageous billing has delivered a new crisis to the NRA, which no one can manage. The New York State Attorney General is investigating all of this for violations of New York State's laws and regulations governing nonprofit groups like the NRA. Wayne LaPierre's lavish personal spending has not been limited to clothes. He also spent a couple $100,000 on air travel and a very peculiar expense for an apartment in Fairfax, Virginia, for a summer intern. Wayne LaPierre spent well over $4,000 per month for an apartment for a young woman who was a summer intern, for a total summer rent of $13,804.84, all paid for with NRA dues, and that is a very, very expensive apartment for Fairfax, Virginia. Wayne LaPierre and the NRA's crisis management law firm have not offered one word of explanation about that apartment that Wayne LaPierre rented for the summer for that young woman. Not one word. Wayne LaPierre and the NRA's law firm and the NRA board members who are at war with each other are going to need a lot more crisis management.
It is Wednesday, the 15th of May of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this warmongering, a poor excuse for a human being? And yes, I am looking at you, Danny. You really think you're gonna wag the Stollen on us? Do you really think? And, well, I got to tell you, folks, I think we're way past the beat of the war drums. I hear bugles a-bugling. And what is it about certain elements of the media that just loves a war? It doesn't matter if we're going in it alone. Of course, Trump will not have any European allies. He will have none of this coalition of the willing. But all is not lost in his quest to either divert attention from his voluminous crimes or just to get his jollies by having a war. All is not lost in that quest because he has commitments from Eric Prince and his mercenaries. So he's not really going in alone. Because with that kind of ally, geez, people might get electrocuted in their showers in the barracks. like they did the last time? Well, I don't know. If it wasn't so terribly tragic, it'd be like a Keystone Cops movie with no sound. My God, folks. I'm kind of angry about it, actually. And that's not only what's going on in the world, because we also have goddamn Alabama. Goddamn Alabama. We can goddamn Mississippi, goddamn. But everybody knows about Alabama. Everybody knows. And I once again find it, another thing that makes me angry is when media refers to how this law came to be. Pretty much a total ban on abortion in Alabama. No exception for rape or incest. And it was described as the Alabama Senate passed. No, the Alabama Senate didn't pass. The Alabama Republicans in the Senate passed it. Because every single person of color, every woman, and 4 white men, Republican men, to be clear here, voted for the exception to rape and incest. But the 25 right-wing evangelical white men, and I got to put white in there twice, because that's how white they are, and maybe even more, they voted not only push this illegal, unconstitutional law, but also said no exception for rape and incest. Because in Alabama, no one gets between a right-wing evangelical and his daughter that he got pregnant. No one. Not a government, not a person. No one. So you can understand why Roy Moore would think, I was hitting on little girls at the mall. They weren't my daughter. I'm a virtuous man. Yeah. Alabama. Everybody knows about Alabama. What's on the rest of the menu today? Because there's even more going on in the world, and we just had to curate a show. We had to put ourselves in that proverbial bubble and turn off the info. Well, the NRA is finally attacking the right enemy in its war on itself, and jeez, Oliver North's involved too, which is great. And I want to know, this apartment or domicile that Wayne LaPierre rented for this young woman, does she have any, any connections to Vlad or a few of his friends? I wonder. No one's talked about that yet. Maybe not, but I don't know. If I was writing the spy novel, that would be a tiny little element, a foreshadow. On the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays, by the way. Mitch McConnell has blocked over 100 bills in just 4 months. Well, he said that's what he was going to do. Nothing's going to get past Mitch. Trump's resistance to congressional oversight had a very bad day in court. Gotta have some kind of good news in all this now, don't we? And Red Hen owner Stephanie Wilkinson said kicking Sarah Sanders out of her restaurant a year ago has not only been good for business, but good for the community as well. Well, like I said, we need some good news. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where Amnesty International accused Venezuela of human rights violations. And Spain's Supreme Court ruled that 5 jailed Catalan separatists can be sworn into Parliament, but their trial will not be delayed. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. If you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page, right over there, you'll see it, is the link to the chat room, and that is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. And of course it is, because Kelly does stalwart work here at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Kelly. Would you please then look to the leftish of the page from the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. And over there is the link to become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio. And thank you to our newest Patreon. You know who you are. And really appreciate it. And folks, we have been broadcasting 24/7, 365 for 8 years this year. Wow. And machinery does wear out in that time. In fact, we had machines wear out about 4 years ago after they've been running for about 4 to 5 years. And so we're looking for some newish machines in which to take over, and we have to save money to do that. And thank you for your generosity, because that keeps Resistance Radio resisting as the founders originally intended, right back there with Ben Franklin. I'm not kidding. He had a blog. Yes, he did. I think it was like Poor Richard's Almanac or something. Yeah, some people called it a leaflet, but it was a blog. And so we have been resisting, and it is because of your generosity, and we thank you for that. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can simply do so by going to simply @Netroots Radio, because Tom runs that, and he does such great work. He made it so simple. Because if you want to follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, you got to go to Cookbook West, because I run that, and I made a mistake somehow. But it's not really a mistake. You put your name on it and call it art. That's what I was taught at a very young age. Indeed. So you can do that. And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I put those links on social media, where I can also be found myself at Justice Putnam. Wow, I got that in. So do get podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and really everywhere. Everywhere podcasts can be found. Everywhere. All righty. Let's take a gander. I just love using that kind of language. I really do. It confuses some people, and I like to sow confusion. You know, that's what the media is accusing Donald Trump of doing. Oh, he just likes to be divisive. He likes to sow confusion. Yeah, and he also doesn't like to pay the people who work for him. You know, lots of people. I know there are some communities down there, I think it's in Costa Rica, communities of, a community of folks who have worked at his golf courses who have, after a period of time, retired and able to support themselves down there because of the money that they saved working at his golf courses. But they would have been able to support themselves in even better way if he had actually paid them what you're supposed to pay people. And no wonder he's bankrupting the United States. It could be by design because of his friends. But how do you lose? How many billions again? How do you lose that? You got to work hard at it. And being a playboy, you work hard at it. Speaking of working hard at doing nothing, Mitch McConnell. Oliver Willis brings us this offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And, of course, he's at Share Blue Media. Well, since January, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has prevented over 100 bills that have passed in the House from even coming up for a vote. His actions obstruct and ignore legislation that millions of Americans backed by electing a Democratic House majority in 2018. But that doesn't matter to the Republicans. They've been on a decades-long quest to become a one-party nation. And now that we are essentially becoming a one-party nation, well, let's put it this way. You mean the Democrats might have an access to becoming their own one-party nation. And I have always argued, if we, the Democrats, are the only ones standing after all of this, we are not a one-party nation. We're Democrats. My God, we'll be lucky to have, keep from having a multi-party parliament. Chuck Schumer said on the floor, in a floor speech, we have multiple House-passed bills awaiting action. Leader McConnell need only call them up for debate, but instead, the legislative graveyard, where good legislation doesn't even get debated or amended, let alone passed, is upon us. Senate Democrats noted last month that more than 100 bills passed by the House are awaiting legislative action in the Senate. Well, if they've gone to the legislative graveyard, then that means Mitch McConnell is the Senate Grim Reaper. He looks like one, too. He's looking less like a turtle and more like a Grim Reaper, or a Grim Reaper turtle. A full 53% of votes cast in 2018 supported a Democratic agenda versus 45.2% for Republicans. Democrats had a popular vote majority of more than 8.6 million votes, the most in 44 years since right after Nixon resigned. And I got to tell you, they've been waiting for that. And everything that happened during Nixon and right after Nixon has to be changed, because the getting was good until the getting got taken away from them, and they are the rightful owners of the United States, don't you know? The progressive agenda, ending pharma greed and making medicines affordable, ensuring students can graduate without debt, raising the minimum wage, and putting more money in the pockets of working families, delivered a Democratic majority to Congress, said Representatives Mark Pocan and Pramila Jayapal, co-chairs of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, in a statement to Share Blue Media. And of course, you know the Republicans are going to say, what? Ending pharma greed, making medicines affordable, ensuring students can graduate without debt, and raising the minimum wage and putting more money in the pockets of working families? That's socialism. I would say it's free enterprise, but I'm a romantic. If Mitch McConnell and congressional Republicans continue to stonewall the progressive agenda at the behest of billionaires and special interests, they will pay a price at the polls next year, Pocan and Jayapal continued it in their statement to Share Blue Media. The McConnell-engineered logjam includes popular legislation like H.R. 1 for the People Act, which included a number of anti-corruption measures. Look, anti-corruption and voting security, that's not on the Republican agenda this election cycle, just so you know. The House also passed the Paycheck Fairness Act, which makes it easier for women to challenge pay discrimination. Well, if they can challenge pay discrimination, that means they might be able to pay for their own abortions, and that's been deemed illegal in Alabama, soon to be visited upon a state wherever you might live too. McConnell is so devoted to opposing a progressive agenda that he has already promised to continue his blockade even if Trump loses the election in 2020. McConnell's actions show a continued disconnect from American voters and a commitment to pursuing an agenda completely different from the one millions of people have made clear they stand by. And I should add, in this reporter's opinion, it's not a disconnect, necessarily. It's an exacting of punishment because the little people dared vote a black man into office. Ian Millhiser of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Judge Amit Mehta is the anti-Scalia calm and unfailingly polite, honest about his concerns, and seemingly quite open to the arguments of legal counsel. The hearing Mehta held yesterday, Tuesday, in Trump v. Committee on Oversight and Reform featured none of the posturing that characterizes so many Supreme Court hearings. If you paid attention to Judge Mehta's tone, you'd think he was being nice to Trump's lawyers. But the substance of the hearing was a disaster for Trump's efforts to resist congressional subpoenas digging into his finances. At one point, Mehta warned that, under Trump lawyer William Consovoy's sweeping legal theory, congressional investigations into Watergate would have been unconstitutional. At another, the judge suggested that Congress might have the inherent power to investigate the president in order to inform the public of potential misconduct. Judge Mehta did ask probing questions of Doug Letter, the lawyer defending a subpoena from the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, but the bulk of those questions seemed to be probing how Mehta would write an opinion ruling against Trump, not who should actually prevail. Nothing is certain until Mehta releases his opinion, and even then that opinion will need to survive appeal. And how many decades has the Federalist Society been packing the courts? But Judge Mehta appears likely to rule in favor of congressional oversight. More importantly, he seems likely to rule quickly, making it more difficult for Trump to prevent oversight by simply running out the clock. And that's why we're banging the war drums and actually adding a few buglers too, in this reporter's opinion. The issue in Trump is a subpoena to Mazars USA, an accounting firm that worked for Trump and his companies. The House is seeking various Trump financial documents from the firm, and the firm says it will remain neutral in this dispute. Thus, Trump needs a court order preventing Mazars from complying with the subpoena, or Mazar appears ready to comply. Trump's primary argument is that a congressional committee must act within a, quote, legitimate legislative sphere, or, as Consovoy repeatedly put it during Tuesday's hearing, Congress cannot merely seek to engage in law enforcement when it issues a subpoena. Yet, as Mehta noted during the hearing, the question of whether Congress is acting within the legislative sphere is not a particularly high bar. At one point, Mehta quoted from a 1927 Supreme Court decision suggesting that a subpoena is valid if it concerns a matter on, quote, which legislation could be had and would be materially aided by the information which the investigation was calculated to elicit. In other words, it could be a fishing expedition, folks. At another, Mehta asked whether he should follow lower court decisions indicating that a congressional subpoena is valid unless it is plainly incompetent to a legislative inquiry. By this standard, the subpoena seeking Trump's records is clearly valid. Among other things, it could reveal whether Trump lied on legally mandated financial disclosure forms, something that could prompt Congress to strengthen the laws governing such disclosures. It could also reveal whether Trump has a financial conflict of interest that influences his negotiations with Congress. Now, I was under the impression during Whitewater, remember that impeachment trial, that they were going after supposed crimes that Clinton had committed before he became president. And Trump's lawyers are floating this argument that you can't impeach a president for the crimes he committed before he became president. So I guess they're admitting to crimes. But trust me, if they did crimes then, they're doing crimes now. And that's why we are hearing war drums a-banging and a brassy bugle call, too. Dan Desai Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Almost a year after kicking White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders out of her restaurant, Red Hen owner Stephanie Wilkinson not only stands by her decision as the right thing to do, she also says it's been good for both her business and her community. After nearly a year, I'm happy to say business is really good, Wilkinson wrote in a Tuesday op-ed in the Washington Post. Better than good, actually. And besides, the boost to our charities in the area, our town's hospitality and sales revenue have gone up too. Wilkinson was thrust into the national spotlight in June of 2018 after Sanders attempted to eat at the Red Hen, a small restaurant in Lexington, Virginia. Wilkinson asked Sanders to leave because of her support of Trump's unconscionable family separation policy at the U.S.-Mexico border. The benefit to both her restaurant and the surrounding communities, Wilkinson said, came from Americans who supported her decision to take a stand against Sanders and who expressed that support by visiting Wilkinson's restaurant or donating to nearby charities and businesses. The family separation policy that Sanders defended resulted in thousands of children, including infants and toddlers, being ripped away from their parents or other family members and tossed into cages, or as I like to describe them, icebox baby gulags, because that's what they are. And the Trump administration still has not reunited all the families who were separated, and Trump has already broken his promise to stop separating additional families because he likes to inflict pain on people. He gets his jollies off it, folks. In this reporter's opinion, now due to protests and intense attention, the Red Hen was forced to close for 10 days following the incident, but when it reopened, Wilkinson said she saw an outpouring of love and support. In the following weeks, people who had never been to the Shenandoah Valley traveled out of their way to eat with us, she said. Hundreds of orders for our Red Hen Spice Blend poured in, and the love spread far and wide beyond our door as supporters sent thousands of dollars in donations in our honor to our local food pantry, our domestic violence shelter, and our first responders. In other words, a bunch of socialists came to the aid of another socialist, but we like to call them red-blooded true blue Americans. In the end, Wilkinson has a message for everyone who stands up against the immorality and cruelty of the Trump administration. Our haters may have believed that there were more of them than of us, but it turns out we have more than enough to keep us cooking. And to everyone who might be fearful about taking a stand, I say don't be. Resistance is not futile for you or your business. Indeed. All right, let's get to our break, and when we come back from the break, we're going to go through weather from around the world, because I got to tell you, we got a lot of weather from around a lot of the world, and then we're going to finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, Alien meets Solaris. It's not an understatement to say that Claire Denis' High Life is a strange and arty film that doesn't go out of its way to appeal to anyone. It's a weird mix of sci-fi and horror and contains a lot of bodily fluids, but it somehow manages to come together and work. Set in the not-so-distant future, High Life tells the story of a group of convicts serving life sentences, or in some cases haven't been sentenced to death, but who are given the option of having their sentences commuted in order to serve science. They agree to journey into outer space towards a black hole in search of an alternative energy source after some vaguely referenced environmental disaster on Earth. The spaceship's crew is headed by a scarily demented scientist, Dr. Dibbs, played by Juliette Binoche, whom we learn in flashbacks was in prison herself for killing her own children. She's obsessed with trying to create the perfect child from the damaged DNA of her fellow convicts and space travelers. One of these convicts, Monty, played by Robert Pattinson, decides after a time he wants nothing to do with the experiments. He attempts to find some semblance of normalcy in space, even when a disaster leaves him as the sole beneficiary of Dr. Dibbs' experiments in the form of a daughter. Ultimately, they are the only survivors aboard the spacecraft, and this father-daughter relationship forms the strongest part of the movie. Pattinson, best known for playing Edward Cullen in the iconic Twilight series, shows that he has come into his own as an actor and can carry a movie, which he decidedly does here. While High Life may leave you feeling frustrated by unanswered questions or sometimes just wondering what's going on, it's nonetheless a genuinely artistic effort and worthy of a watch. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. Antarctica is known for its great expanses of white, and not just snow.
If it's fresh, it can either be still white or pinkish, and eventually it all turns brown, muddy brown.
Stef Bokhorst is an ecologist at Vrije University in Amsterdam, and the initially white stuff he's talking about is penguin poop.
The first thing you notice of it is the smell. Basically, you're squishing through puddles of what you first think is mud, but it's actually just poo. And that produces that really strong ammonia smell, which you can really smell from miles away.
But it's not just the smell that travels on the wind. Ammonia contains nitrogen, a valuable fertilizer, so the winds carry nourishment to nearby mosses and lichens. And that in turn supports teeming communities of the largest fully terrestrial animals in Antarctica, invertebrates like springtails and mites. Bokhorst and his colleagues took air and plant samples around the poop piles and found this airborne ammonia fertilizer enriches life as far as a mile away. The full details are in the journal Current Biology. And the work makes it easier for scientists like Bokhorst to remotely estimate Antarctica's biodiversity.
You don't have to go to all these different field sites. You can actually basically sit at home, take these pictures with the satellites, and then get an idea of where the highest biodiversity should be along the peninsula.
Of course, doctors have long taken a stool sample to get medical information about a patient, and now ecologists will be able to use imagery to track feces and predict its beneficial effects at the bottom of the world. In short, don't poo-poo the poo. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. Netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Can a person be deported for exercising their First Amendment right to freedom of speech? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The Trump administration takes the position that the answer should be yes, but fortunately, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit in New York recently ruled that the Trump administration is wrong about this. The decision happened in the case of Ravi Ragbir, a lawful permanent resident who long ago came to the United States from Trinidad and Tobago, and who is the executive director of the New Sanctuary Coalition. Mr. Ragbeer committed a nonviolent crime some 20 years ago and has been a model member of the community ever since, having lived, in the words of the court, the life of a redeemed man. He has been granted a customary reprieve from deportation year after year and has not violated any law and wasn't going to be deported. Until the Trump administration began targeting immigration activists for deportation, and Ragbeer, a public spokesperson for the New Sanctuary Coalition, was caught up in that deportation net. Fortunately, the appeals court ruled that his public expression played a significant role in the government's targeting him for deportation, and that this kind of retaliation and retribution is forbidden by the First Amendment. Ragbeer will be allowed to stay in the country as his case continues in the courts. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1942. The labor movement lost one of its most prolific voices. T-Bone Slim was born Matty Valentin Pioka Hutta in Ashtabula, Ohio. His parents were Finnish immigrants. The exact year of his birth is still uncertain, as is much of his early life. He eventually joined the Industrial Workers of the World, or the Wobblings. He wrote regularly for the IWW's weekly newspaper and magazines. He traveled the country working odd jobs. One of his acquaintances called T-Bone Slim a dyed-in-the-wool hobo. Everywhere he went, he wrote. Those who knew him remembered he always had a pad of paper in his pocket. He wrote columns and poems and song lyrics with humor and poignancy. Eventually, T-Bone Slim made his way to New York City. He got a job as a river barge captain, and it was on this day in labor history that his body was found floating in the East River. The circumstances of his death are as uncertain as those of his birth. No one claimed his body, and he was buried in a potter's field. Despite the anonymity of his death, his words live on as an inspiration for workers today. Some of the writings of T-Bone Slim have been gathered into a book called Juice is Stranger Than Fiction. His popular songs are included in the IWW's Little Red Songbook. Among them, A Worker's Plea, The Mysteries of Hobo Life, and A Lumberjack's Prayer. Here is the late, great Utah Phillips singing one of T-Bone Slim's most well-loved songs, the most popular wobbler.
I'm as gentle as a lamb, but they take me for a ram. They go wild, simply wild over me. Oh, the cop, he went wild over me, and he held his gun where everyone could see. He was breathing rather hard when he saw my union card. He went wild, simply wild over me. Then the judge, he went wild over me.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
I'm Mark Boulanger. The Global Union for Teachers, Education International, is warning that the use of artificial intelligence in schools may lead to loss of privacy for students and minimizing the role of teachers. EI represents more than 30 million teachers and other education workers in 172 countries. It recently released a report outlining concerns that huge education companies will collect massive amounts of data on students and replace teachers with computer programs. I talked to one of the authors of the report about EI's concerns. Anna Hogan is a lecturer at the University of Brisbane in Australia. I asked her about the activities of Pearson, one of the education corporations using artificial intelligence in education.
Pearson's one of the world's largest education companies, and it's moved from being this textbook supplier to become this really mainstream provider of all sorts of education products and services. So things like curriculum materials, assessment, online learning programs, teacher professional development, and the list goes on. And what Pearson's doing, or their strategy, is really moving into that development of the digital learning aspects of their business. And how they're doing that is working towards personalized learning programs that start to integrate artificial intelligence. So personalized learning is where students sit at their computer and they learn through an algorithm which dictates what they need to learn. So you can think of it a little bit like a Siri or Alexa becoming your new school teacher. And the way that companies like Pearson develop these programs, it requires a huge amount of data. They need to understand how students learn to be able to program an algorithm that can essentially teach students what they need to know and in a way that's best for that particular individual. So to get to your question about why we're concerned about this type of data privatization, and there's quite a few issues here. So the first one's around privacy. So in terms of how student data is collected and what types of data are collected. And then this links to the issues of consent. So often users don't have a knowledge or understanding that their data is being collected or in the way that it is used. So for example, Pearson will collect data from users interacting with its products and services in responses to their exercises, assignments, coursework, instructor comments, the activities they've completed. While these are all de-identified and aggregated to analyse how Pearson services are used, and then going into their education research and supporting the strategic development of its products and services. But in the report, we basically suggest that then this leads to issues of transparency, as consent is not always explicitly sought. And then there's also issues around data ownership and data responsibility. As Pearson suggests, they're only stewards of student data, and it's actually owned by its institutional customers, which then leads to this idea that, I suppose, around data openness, because if schools own the data or students own the data and Pearson owns the products that are being produced and sold from the data, and essentially the knowledge is being locked up in corporate silos, meaning that the benefit for learners and society more broadly is not realised. So this is what we call the privatisation of the data and the data infrastructure. So if Pearson was to open up and share their knowledge of their algorithms and what they're learning from this data, then potentially the social benefits for all of society in terms of student knowledge and understanding would be greatly enhanced. And I suppose the last thing to sort of raise in terms of the concern is about the ethics of these programs themselves. So we know that personalised learning uses algorithms to predict customers' capabilities. And these predictions basically allow students to go to next types, or it basically grants or withholds their access to different types of learning opportunities. So in a way, students are being taught through these predicted actions, and it's not really allowing them the opportunity to surprise us as they often do in our traditional classrooms.
The report prepared by Ms. Hogan and Sam Sellar is called Pearson 2025, Transforming Teaching and Privatizing Education Data. You can find more about the report on Education International's website at www.ei-ie.org. And that's it. International labor news you can use. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 60 degrees. We're looking at a high, maybe 67, 68, though we have rain occurring as I speak. The winds are out of the due west, bringing with it the monsoon that is hitting the Bay Area, or has hit the Bay Area and continues. Which reminds me, we're going to be continuing with this rain through the rest of the week, and the only spot of sunshine without rain, because we will have sunshine with rain during this next week or so, is that, actually Monday, we do have a forecast of just partly cloudy. So we'll see how that turns out. Rain totals today, we're looking at about 1/4 of an inch, and then overnight, maybe about 1/10 of an inch. Showers will be occurring, even though it's light rain at the moment. And winds will remain light and variable, though they'll pick up and come out of the east. That's why the rain totals will be so much lower tonight, moving at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And they'll be out of the south-southeast tomorrow in the morning, but will shift later in the afternoon or later in the morning tomorrow. Then again out of the west, bringing all this rain again. So we're looking at about another 1/4 of an inch tomorrow, but something less than 1/10 of an inch overnight. Though we have 1/4 of an inch until tonight, so it looks like almost 1/3 of an inch just for the next 24 hours, which is quite a bit. And so as I said, rain will continue. Those rain totals will max out at a little bit over 1/3 of an inch and as low as about 1/10 of an inch. Grass pollen is rated at moderate. The air quality index locally is good at 18 parts per million, and the daytime UV index remains at the moderate range of 5. Barometric pressure is falling at 29.51 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Well, indeed, because it's raining. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 69 degrees and sunny. Paris is 68 and sunny. Rome is 54 degrees with a rain shower, and they not only have another thunderstorm activity warning in which the electrical grid could be impacted, but they are also having a flood watch because of the rain. Well, Kiev is 72 degrees and fair. Kabul is 68 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 79 degrees, and it is now just ticked to 81 degrees and mostly cloudy in Hong Kong. Tokyo is 65 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 58 degrees with rain, and as I intimated earlier, they are under a flood watch because of a monsoon. And New York is 56 degrees Fahrenheit and fair as fair can be. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Anonymous worker bees out of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Amnesty International yesterday, Tuesday, asked the International Criminal Court to investigate alleged crimes against humanity committed by the government of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, especially after a wave of violent protests in January. Remember those? Did you even know? In a report presented in Mexico City, the group said it had found evidence of extrajudicial executions, arbitrary detentions and deaths, and injuries due to excessive use of force by Maduro's government. The Venezuelan government did not immediately respond to a request for comment because they were still out there beating the crap out of people and putting their opposition in jail and charging them with treason. Venezuela is reeling from an acute political and economic crisis that has worsened since January, when opposition leader Juan Guaido declared himself interim president, arguing that Maduro's re-election was fraught with irregularities. Guaido, who has been recognized as Venezuela's rightful leader by about 50 countries, including the U.S., and much of Latin America, has sought Maduro's resignation. As we have said for years, in Venezuela there is a systematic policy of repression against the opposition. Amnesty International's director for the Americas, Erica Guevara, told reporters after the presentation. An Amnesty International team visited Venezuela between January 31st and the 17th of February and documented 6 extrajudicial executions, 3 cases of excessive force, and 6 arbitrary detentions. The cases are representative of a broader pattern of human rights violations that took place in January of 2019, the report states. The 6 extrajudicial executions bore many similarities, the group wrote. All of the victims were young men who were shot in the chest while in custody, and some were tortured. In all 6 cases, the crime scene was tampered with in order to cover up the facts, as were the bodies of the victims. Maybe they learned that from Saudi Arabia. The group's investigators also found that families of the victims received minimal information about government investigation into the acts of violence, and I would presume also maybe a bit of harassment. In January of 2019, multiple acts of violence were committed consistently in all states and with a high degree of coordination between the security forces at the national and state levels, Amnesty International wrote. The authorities right up to the highest level, including Nicolas Maduro, have at the very least tolerated such acts.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Bailan Carreño and Sam Edwards of Reuters bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Spain's Supreme Court has ruled that 5 Catalan separatist leaders can leave prison to be sworn in as lawmakers next Tuesday, but said it would not halt the trial over their role in Catalonia's independence bid in 2017. Oriol Junqueras, Josep Rull, Jordi Turul, and Jordi Sanchez all won seats in the lower house of Parliament in a national election on the 28th of April. Raul Romeva won an upper chamber seat. The 5 are currently being held in custody on charges of rebellion, sedition, and misuse of public funds relating to the 2017 independence referendum in Catalonia, which was deemed illegal by Spanish courts, and a subsequent unilateral declaration of independence. They deny the charges. In a ruling issued yesterday, Tuesday, the court said it did not agree to the request for the trial to be suspended or for a grant of immunity, yet they will still be sworn in. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period, so check out that link in the show notes and links diary and Daily Coast, please. We will meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. You know Netroots Radio is going to be broadcasting on, so please do stay tuned all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie de novembre. Tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.